Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Dollpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Georgette Taylor, and I want to say thank you so much for joining me again today for another fabulous show. I have an extraordinary guest, and I'm so excited. I can't wait for him to share his story with you. My guest today is Dr. Erick DuPree. He is an award-winning author, a cultural anthropologist, and long-life doll collector whose book, Dolls Beyond Play, reveals the hidden stories dolls tell about culture, identity, and memory. And I want to thank you for being a guest on the show, Erick. I'm so excited to have you today.
I am so grateful to be here to talk about this, to talk with you, to your viewers, as a social scientist, to learn even more about your dolls
Oh,
and your journey. Like the whole dolls never get old for me.
yeah, that's so cool. I love the fact that they never get old for you. And your book really explains that a lot about why they never really get old because they're so cultural. They go back so far and they have so many different layers of how they show up in people's lives and what they mean to people. So I think that's great. And so, speaking about your book, right, you weave a lot of threads together within there. The heart of a collector, right? You have the eye of an anthropologist, as well as the voice of an author. So, I think everybody listening here would like to know, how did this journey begin for you, and which passion came first?
There has never been a time in my life where there hasn't been dolls. Like my earliest memories, there's this great picture of my sister and I think I must be like 6 and she's probably 2, holding um, like a transformer or some toy that I got for Christmas.
Mhm.
And I'm holding on to this giant baby doll that she had gotten. And it was massive, it was as big as she was. And I was obsessed with it. I didn't quite know then why I was so obsessed with it, but
Right,
I mean I do now. But
right.
that's like it starts there. So the dolls always have come first.
Mm. Okay, that's interesting. Okay.
Dolls
And
came
and
first.
and what made you decide to be an anthropologist? If the dolls came first, what transpired in your life to for you to say, well, I don't want to just do history, or I don't want to just collect dolls, and I don't want to just spend my time in the doll community.
Towards the end of my undergraduate degree, which was in classical literature, I was like, I don't know what I want to do because I like all these different things. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, and anthropology provided the platform for me to take a wide lens at how humanity creates identity
Mm-hmm.
and self and tells stories. And for years, my work really focused around like marriage politics, the way that people collect objects, really literature like books, and how they
Mm-hmm.
stories,
Right.
a lot about religion, because they were very common themes for folk.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Right.
and at some point, I had an idea. This is probably about 15 years ago. I had an idea, um, or I had a question. And the
Mm-hmm.
question I had, Georgette, was why do doll artists make dolls?
It's a great question, man.
Just,
That is
because
such a great question.
I'm not a doll artist. Like as much
Right.
as I would love to have grown up to be one, that's not my talent. You know, oh, my talent can be writing about them, but I can't sculpt a doll. That was my question. Why did doll artists make dolls? And specifically, what I wanted to know was what came first for the artist? Like, did they want to create a doll because they love dolls? So it was an extension of the story?
Right.
Or were they artists and creators and the
Mm-hmm.
doll just happened to be the medium that they used?
Right. Right. Hmm.
That's where it began.
That's where it began. Wow. And and just asking that question leads to so many different answers. It's just
So many.
so many different answers. I mean, I could just talk, think about even just the amount of doll makers and creators that I have interviewed, on my other show in the doll world and on this show. Yeah, the stories are so different, right? Of where they came to have a doll represented. I know for me personally, um, for me it's funny because my story with the big beautiful dolls was that a friend of mine came over my house and she saw I happened to have, I think I started buying Byron Large dolls because I just loved the design and I hadn't seen any African American dolls that looked like that. They were just so beautiful and the costumes were just so detailed. That's what I really love about fashion dolls. And she saw them, and my friend's an entrepreneur at heart. So the first thing she thought why would you spend that much money for a doll? And the
Right.
second thing, when she went back home, she had this idea of this plus size doll because we're plus size women. And she said, well, do they have any dolls that look like that? And we were like, and I was like, no. I said, you talking about baby dolls? She says, no. I said, there's no dolls. And all I said was, hey, I just really want to be a part of that. So for me, I think I love dolls, but not to the point where I collected them. But when she brought that idea to me, I thought this is amazing because they don't have anything that represents who we were as
Exactly.
women. And then I think that's a lot of times people do start or do create dolls because there's nothing out there that represents them, right? Or their culture, or you know what I mean, or anything that they can connect with. And so they decide to do a doll and realize that thinking about a doll and doing a doll, totally two different things.
Exactly. Um,
Yeah.
and that's what I discovered in the research. The research, when I went
Mm-hmm.
from doll artist to doll collector, I talked to a lot of doll artists, and they're in the book, and I got, different thoughts and ideas. And then I was like, well, why do people collect dolls? Because I still wasn't sure why I collected dolls. And what I discovered from collectors was that they collect dolls because dolls represent a reflection of themselves. So
Mm-hmm.
a person of color might collect many dolls and also might really focus on collecting dolls of color that
Mm-hmm.
like them. And
Right.
if they grew up without that representation because all there were white dolls, there's like an even deeper layer there into like why they're collecting or creating. And I think we really see that birth right now with African American dolls, like independent makers, like toy makers,
Right.
making versions of like the American Girl doll, but in wide range of racial color,
Mm-hmm.
hair texture,
Mm-hmm.
appropriate features, and
Right.
for decades, the hundreds, thousands of years, that just didn't exist for a whole bunch of reasons, and I get into that
Mm-hmm.
in the book. Uh,
Yes.
but yeah, so it went from artist to collector, and I had this book idea, and as I began to write the book, what I realized is that there was no single source, and this is shocking to say, but there really was no single source of doll scholarship across time. Like that was
Yes.
accessible to people. There might be an article in a journal. There might be books about child psychology and dolls. There might be a niche doll with a book like Japanese dolls. There might
Right.
be plenty of like value guides
That's true.
and
Yes.
a
Mm-hmm.
plethora of stuff about Barbie.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but
Yes.
yeah, but like nothing in between. And
Mm-hmm.
so the book that people hold in their hands, the end of the book I wrote first. And then I went back because I was like, this isn't a complete story, which is why I say in the opening of the book that I didn't expect or anticipate to write 450 pages about dolls.
And I was just gonna ask you that question, like, where there's a moment during your research where you thought, wow, this is like bigger than I thought it was going to be.
There were two moments where I thought that. One, I read a study that was done by someone in museum sciences, and
Mm-hmm.
it was about French fashion dolls and the globalization of the 19th century French fashion doll. And she had a line in her paper which basically said a little girl in Iowa
Mm-hmm.
could have the same doll as a little girl in Venice. First time that globalization of dolls really happened, whether they were Bru, Jameau, whether they were Kessner. And I was like, wow, we don't talk about that globalization, or we
Mm-hmm.
think about it like in today's language, like Barbie, but we
Right.
don't think about it as like bigger.
Yes.
And the other thing, and this is the anthropologist, how dolls influence culture, that same French fashion doll or China head doll from
Mm-hmm.
like 1860. So a little girl in the antebellum South might have that doll, right?
Right.
And the enslaved person, they're seeing the kinship of that little girl with this doll. And then they go and they create their version of that from the materials that they have. People look at folk dolls and I don't think they think about like the value of a scrap of fabric to
Right.
someone who doesn't have
Mm-hmm.
that. So now
Right.
that little girl has her version of a doll, and they're both mirroring the same behavior of identity.
Right.
But what we
Yeah.
don't ever talk about is
Mm.
that the doll that the white girl has, right, in antebellum South,
Right.
has the value of that whole enslaved family. That's how the
Wow.
culture overlap. Wow, I had a
Yeah.
wow moment. And I was like, there's more here about like what dolls are doing and why. And the other aha moment I had is whenever we think about dolls, or whenever dolls are talked about, it's always through the lens of a child. And we never, not a lot of research or conversation happens around the doll is bigger, the ritual object of the doll, the talismanic property of a
Hmm.
doll,
Hmm.
all of that. So once the floodgates were open, it was, I'm not done. Keep it going.
I'm just gonna keep going. I'm just gonna keep going. I think that was interesting what you said, because I don't think people look at it. Well, like you said, nobody really looks at it that way. And even when it comes to folk dolls, right? Most people, when they see that type of doll, they see it in a museum,
Right.
or they see it in a place where they think that, okay, it belongs in a museum, like it's art. Like, I still don't think sometimes that they connect that children played with these things or created these things to give them comfort, to play with them, because you're so used to seeing them behind glass.
Sometimes, what also happens in the sterilization, I call it sterilization, the sterilization of the museum sciences is that folk doll. It ends up being called like mixed media,
Mm,
figurative object of, you know, indigenous people.
exactly. Yeah.
If
Yeah.
it looks like a doll and smells like a doll, it's a doll. Just
It's
call
gonna
it a doll.
it's gonna
That's
play like a doll. Trust me.
Uh, and so
Yeah.
because of that, because there's like this idea that dolls don't have value in the intellectualized cultural conversation, they don't get the platform
Yeah.
that a piece of pottery gets or
Right.
a painting gets. But unlike those other objects, the doll is the only object that directly reflects its maker.
Mm, that's so
Look
true.
behind you.
That's so true. I know, right?
They directly reflect the
Yeah.
maker,
That's
whether
so
it's an art doll or a baby
yes.
doll.
That's so true.
Yeah.
Wow. I never like that was a wow moment for me too. I never thought about that. Like, I
Right.
mean, I knew it, but hearing somebody say that, it made me think about that totally different just now. And it's just wow. So let me ask you this: all your anthropology work and the things that you do, and also I think looking at dolls from their cultural perspective, was there one tradition, I guess, or community that you discovered that completely surprised you about their doll tradition or how they utilize dolls?
Mm, that's a great question. There are two, I think maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I think the thing that surprised me the most, and I hope it surprises readers as they read the book, is no matter the culture, in almost every instance, a doll is teaching a child or a community a pattern of behavior. So antique Japanese dolls of the Hitamatsuri of the Girls' Day. You have these ceremonial dolls, and below the dolls are dishes and play food, and little girls are learning to come into service, into
Mm-hmm.
what it means to hold space for being the maker. That exists as far back as ancient Egypt and as far present
Mm-hmm.
as the original purpose of Barbie. Because
Mm-hmm.
Barbie, when Ruth Handler created her, was creating a doll that was like the perfect hostess, the perfect housewife, what have you,
Mm-hmm.
uh, teaching that same behavioral pattern. So I would say that the thing that really stood out to me was it didn't matter who the culture was or who the people were, the interaction remained the same. Even when you look at dolls in religious iconography, like some people will see a statue of Mary, uh, and it's been dressed. Adult is doing that, but the idea of care, the idea of honoring, the idea of believing that then the vessel it becomes a vessel of the divine.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that exists throughout many cultures, uh,
Mm-hmm.
even so much today. Like you probably don't think about it, but you likely talk to your dolls, even as an
I
adult.
literally do.
It's in your brain, right? It's like a, hi, how are you, doll? But you're just having a dialogue like, oh, this outfit looks cute. Oh, I'm gonna make a little change. Uh, yeah, and so it's a natural occurrence in human development. So I found that fascinating.
So what do you think dolls tell us about ourselves then? How we see beauty, gender and things like that. What do you really think that they tell us about who we are?
So that answer is probably as different as every person who collects dolls. But people who collect and love dolls do it from a place of memory. So in the beginning of this conversation, you said you really weren't a doll collector.
True.
It wasn't your thing, which is so funny because you have such a popular podcast now about dolls. You know?
Well,
Um,
not to interrupt you, but I did that because I know that the people who made the dolls, nobody would hear, like you said, nobody would hear their stories. And I just thought it was just so important for these independent doll makers that were not seen on the shelf, that people knew about who they were and the work that they did. So yeah, that was really the reason. Like,
yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wrote this book. At some point, you saw the Byron Lars dolls. Byron Lars, of course, a famous African American fashion designer, dressed Whitney Houston, everybody. And his dolls are both fashion but Africana.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like it's both. It is
Yes.
so it is a reckoning to homeland in a way that is familiar to you, that you see,
Hmm.
and then it birthed a wider process. So when people collect dolls, for the most part, they collect them from a place of, I remember this doll when my mother had
Mhm.
this doll. This doll was missing in my childhood. Fill in the blank.
Right.
More often than not, that is especially for adults, that is the thing. And when I was doing the book during the pandemic, people had so much time that I went into every possible doll group and I dropped a survey. And the survey
Mm.
results are in the book. But one of them, questions I asked several questions, but one of them was, why do you collect dolls? Were you allowed to collect dolls?
Mhm.
How often do you think about dolls? There is nothing, other collectors might disagree, but there is nothing like a doll collector.
That's true.
Doll collector, doll convention, like there's just nothing like it. It is a unique brand of people and
Mhm.
language and shared values, no, regardless of how you come into the dolls.
That is so true. I've been to a couple of doll shows, and yeah, it is. It's nothing like the community. It really isn't. And I think for people are surprised, and I'm sure they're surprised when they see you and that you wrote a book about that. They're surprised when I go and I see people and I'm talking to people about what I do, and they're like, "Oh, I never thought about it like that." And I'm like, "Well, but people have ideas. They want to put out things out there that represent themselves. They love, like you said, the texture of a doll, the style of a doll, the clothing of the doll. I mean, so I do think it's such a beautiful, eclectic community. So let me ask you this question: since you wrote this book about dolls, and you you deal with a lot of cultural, a lot of history, psychology. When you were doing the book, and you asked that question, the survey, the question to all dog collectors, did you find that there were any setbacks, I guess, or a lot of challenges for young men, for boys in those communities, right? To play with dolls, to have that be accepted by the community or the culture or anything like that? Because I think it's a huge thing, which is I think is interesting because there's so many male doll creators. But just having the ideas and looking at those cultures and talking to people, has that been an issue? And if it has been an issue, how have they dealt with that?
Yeah, I think that so what I know from the research, and even for myself,
Right.
uh, because just because I wanted that baby doll doesn't mean I got to have that baby doll, right?
Right,
Um,
exactly.
I
Yes.
yeah, I think that depending on the generation, it
Mm,
shifts a little. But anybody who comes through the 70s, 80s, early 90s, you know, dolls are a segmented gender toy. It's a
mm,
gender object. And when talking to doll collectors who are men, what I would hear is a lot of this. I collect the doll that I wanted as a child. I collect the doll that reminds me or takes me
Mhm.
to a fantastical place, like escapism. They collect a fashion doll because they always loved fashion and the doll, but
Mhm.
they're not fashion designers because they
Right.
probably couldn't follow their passion as a kid to
Yes.
become a fashion designer. Instead, they went to do something different that was more
Hmm.
stereotypically masculine. You collect the fashion doll because the fashion doll allows them to be what they want to be,
What they want to be,
what
right?
they want. Yeah, so it fills a gap in the memory. And I talk to a lot of men who collect dolls in secret. Dolls are either put away, they're hidden, they're in a separate room where no one sees them because there's shame there.
Hmm.
Like there was even shame for me in some way around, was I ready? I held this book back for about a year because
Wow.
I wasn't sure I was ready to be Dr. Dolls and to have my scholarship eclipsed by dolls because there's something that people sometimes don't take that seriously.
Hmm.
Oh,
Hmm.
you study dolls. Now, if I said I was the foremost expert on, early modern sculpture, people would be like, oh, but when you say I'm an expert on dolls, they're
Yeah.
like Barbie. And I'm like, well, no, no, dolls that sell for thousands of dollars. That there's only one of these dolls. Dolls that are in the Louvre. People, they don't get that. And I said that also exists.
Hmm.
And when you look at collector spaces, mostly women. It's not that men aren't welcome, but it can feel um,
Hmm.
if your social circle isn't inclusive with women, then it can feel like you don't belong there.
Hmm. That's
I don't,
interesting. I
I
didn't
don't,
think
I
about
don't
that.
experience that, but I became Dr. Dolph.
Right. And proud of it.
So that's a big one, Georgia, is that people they
Yes.
don't feel that they have a place or a voice.
Hmm.
Um, and the interesting thing about it is when you talk to male doll artists, and many of them have been on your show.
Yes.
I'm friends with Aster Yang, Andrew, and
Yes.
his dolls, and Mike Buse and Fabiola,
And Joey and
Joey.
and
When you,
Mel and Robert. Yeah, I mean
yeah,
that's what I'm saying there. And their dolls are fabulous. I mean, they make amazing dolls. And yeah, I think it's a shame that we still have that stigma, like you said, of a doll being segmented, for this population.
and if you talk to them, they'll tell you that they created the doll that was missing in their life. I mean, that's why there's Jean. Jean is Mel.
Yeah, no, Gene is
Jean is
Mel.
Mel.
Yes.
It's another part of their identity. But Jean
Hmm.
is Mel, and it's so great when he talks about it because I'm like, you're not wrong. Um, Robert
Yeah.
Tonner is a little bit different. I don't, he didn't connect with me to interview, but I would imagine the story is likely the same.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm not saying that the doll is him, like Jean is Mel, but definitely
Right.
the next extension of the
The
story.
next extension of him. Yeah, definitely. And I think I think for him, and I can't speak for him. I had him on the show, but still, I think it was a more of a sculptural thing for him in an art way. You know what I mean? That he could create and bring to life this, like you said, and I'm sure it was part of him, but he had the ability to be able to sculpt that out and see what it is that he wanted to bring to life for himself. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I think that's really interesting. So I know writing the book probably was an academic project for you, but it became more of a personal journey. And so, how did this work change you as a person? I know you collected dolls, but the fact that you got to see it in a whole broader perspective, how has that changed you, or has it changed you as a person?
I have a lot more. So I grew up, in a time of like the art doll movements of the 80s and 90s with all the magazines. So I knew a lot about that.
Mm-hmm.
The dolls that I remember, the dolls that I love, it's the dolls that I collect. So it was like, I found it really fascinating. And what sort of shifted perspective for me was looking at how dolls have moved through time and have remained the same. Um, and it was really fascinating to talk to doll artists who the doll is the medium, but not the like it wasn't the doll first. Like my favorite artist that I remember growing up, whose work I collect, who I'm friends with to this day, Monica, she, when I interviewed her, she was like, I was a painter. I made cloth dolls for my kids. People told me to sell the cloth dolls, so I did. Began sculpting to kind of continue telling the story, the femininity that she used to paint.
Right.
And then
Oh,
at some point, she just stops. And I'm like, why did you stop? You were like making money. Everyone loved your dolls. Why did you stop? And her answer to me was, the dolls no longer fit the artistic journey. And when I say stop, I mean
wow.
hard stop and now sculpts in bronze. And I'm like, for her, it was never about the doll.
Mm-hmm.
As much as she loved dolls and doll collectors, it was never about the doll. It was
Mm-hmm.
about what she wanted to say.
Right. Right. Okay. I get
And
that.
and you see that with a lot of artists. And I was just fascinated by that. Like, oh wow, I'm obsessed with your dolls. Please make more. And you're like, yeah, I'm done with dolls. No more dolls. So that I think the other thing that I found really fascinating is, and we don't ever really talk about this enough, it's a business.
Yes.
People just think, oh, I'm going to make a doll and it's no big deal. And like, even just recently, like Robert Tonner posted about tariffs and how the tariffs are impacting his ability to craft the
Yeah.
doll. And the funny
Yes.
thing is that Robert Tonner, with Rachel Hoffman, they're
Mm-hmm.
not making lots of dolls. They're probably
Right.
making $10 a year, right? Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not like back in the day of how Tonner dolls where hundreds of dolls were being made.
Right.
So
Right.
to hear that, like, wow, even this small limited number is almost impossible to get produced.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
or then to hear people say, well, just make your dolls in America. And it's
Oh,
like,
it's not that easy.
not that easy. And so I was so grateful that for the first time, he was really transparent about like the costs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had that really great conversations in the book with Wendy Lawton, who was
Mm-hmm.
just finally like, it's not sustainable. Love the dolls, not sustainable. And it was like, wow,
Yeah.
wow. And I think that we don't talk about that. I think that,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that artists who have struggled and maybe they no longer make dolls or make dolls in a different way are hesitant to talk about it because it feels like a failure.
I think that's why, why I give them the platform because I do think that at the end of the day, and I like to talk to them about business because I think people, like you said, don't understand. Yes, you can make a doll, or you can say I want to make a doll, but you know how much money and time goes into that, and also the struggles I think that the dollpreneur has is because they're creative and they want to create, and then they find themselves stuck in a place where now they have to be much more either analytical, much more business minded, all of these other things that go into you making this doll and you wanting to get out into the public. It goes beyond that, and I try to give them space so that they could come and talk about that because I think that is part of them being a doll maker, and that's because if you make a doll, you want to sell it the majority of the time. How
Yeah.
do you sell it? Now you have to then become another person, put on other hats to do that. And that can be a struggle. And I think the tariffs, I think it sucks, honestly, because it is really destroying, I mean, a lot of lives, we know that, but destroying, the opportunity for independent doll makers to make dolls. And because it costs enough already for the tooling and all of those things, but then when you're trying to bring them over, it's going to cost the consumer so much more money on that end. So I do think it's a shame.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I really learned in the book too, and researching and writing and interviewing is that um, the consumer belief about dolls' value has
Mm,
free fall to someplace else. So it used to be that, in the 90s, early 2000s, people had the relationship to doll, to consumer was very different. So, and there were lots of access points. And there are lots of reasons from that, economic reasons, financial boom,
mm-hmm,
all of that. But then what happens is that there's all these dolls now that no one knows what to do with that don't have a lot of value.
mm-hmm.
The people are like, well, why would I spend
Something like that.
hundred
Yeah.
dollars on, you know, your fashion doll? Oh, or you could even see just like even of the collectible Barbies now, like you can see how globalization has changed their design to kind of like make it look nice, but have to cut the corner so people can afford to buy it because
Mm-hmm.
people don't have the resources to buy or to spend a lot. I mean, I think Joey Versailles is a really great example. He makes such
Hmm.
beautiful dolls, and he works so hard to keep them at a price that people can buy. And sometimes I talk to him like, dude, you're not making any money.
Right.
It's a break even for you.
Right. It's true. It
Break
really
even.
is true. It really is. So let me ask you, so because you're in a space where you see that and you said, like the value of the consumer, right, to the doll maker is different,
Mhm.
right? I guess what message do we both have in a way, really, that would leave them thinking that the magic of their dolls and why their stories matter still matter.
I think that for people who are making art dolls, dolls that like NIADA, North American Doll Institute people, I think that those people are creating art first, and it happens in many cases to be a doll. And so there's a niche community that are buying that, but a lot of those people have other jobs,
Mm,
and art is kind of on the side. I
mhm.
think for the person who is a professional doll maker, like full-time professional doll maker, making dolls that are not mass produced like maybe we once
Right.
did, or like Integrity or what have you, but like Joshua who made Pigeon, like
Yes.
Joan Green for a while, like they're people who are making dolls. I would say that they have to come to a place where they really market to and know their consumer
Mm,
and really tell that story. And unfortunately, for the doll artist, sometimes the ability to hire someone to help with that marketing just isn't there.
mhm.
Like there is no point in putting your dolls in a room full of skinny white women. They might be interested,
Right.
but you have to remember
Right.
that
It's
people are
true.
buying what has the nostalgia or what takes them to a place. And
Mhm,
so your dolls need to be marketed to people who see
mhm,
themselves in your work.
mhm.
And sometimes that platform doesn't exist. I think the other thing too is we've become so digital. The doll magazines are gone. Part of the reason for this book too is a lot of great doll scholarship exists in those doll magazines from the 90s and 2000s, are interviews, but those magazines never got indexed. They're not like available in,
Right. Yeah, I get
private
that.
website. And
Hmm.
so because of that, uh, you had to exhume those stories.
Hmm.
But because of that, there's no people aren't looking. They don't know where to look.
Mm.
So
Wow.
I
Yeah.
think that people who have been successful, like Rachel with the virtual doll,
Virtual doll
I think
convention.
that
Hmm.
she's been able to get success and kind of revive Robert Tonner
Hmm.
only because there is an audience. Like I also think that people like Joey, who have been making dolls for years now, are just beginning to kind of get recognized by like the Modern Doll Collectors Convention and sliding in. And it can be, you have to be in, I guess my answer to you, this is my long answer, I'm
No,
so sorry.
it's okay. You're fine. You're
You have
fine.
to be in it for the long run.
Yeah, you have to. Yeah,
The
I
long game.
think so too.
It's a long game. And at the end of the day, you're making a doll that you absolutely love.
Right. No
But
matter
it's a
what
long,
happens.
yeah, no matter
Yeah.
what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. And then you mentioned a part of the digital world and stuff, and I was going to ask you that question. So now that we're in the age of digital, like avatars and online doll worlds, pretty much, like how do you see this changing the way people connect to dolls, or maybe even to themselves? Since you say dolls are so personal to people, right? How does that? How do you see that?
I think that I'm going to use a couple of examples. I'm going to start with Joshua McKinney and Pigeon.
I love his work. Okay.
Joshua used to make a lot more dolls, and now he really doesn't make many dolls, but
Mm-mm.
Pigeon has become her own real person.
That is so true. And on a side note, Joshua, I want you on my show. But okay, go ahead.
So yeah, his dolls have, oh, so he's taken Pigeon to a place where she's an avatar. She's real. People mimic her makeup and whatnot. And so that's the sustainability. And it's from that powerful like media place
Mm-hmm.
that he's been able to reinvent the art. So
Mm-hmm.
now when he issues a capsule collection of Pigeon, $5 a year or whatever, they sell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Probably enough money to support himself for a year.
Right.
Created scarcity, but he's created the doll beyond the doll. And so it has done the thing that, uh, if you
Mm.
rewind it, here's the overlap. In the 90s, someone like Wendy Lawton or Diana Effner had their own line of dolls that cost $500, but also created dolls for people like Ashton Drake and,
Hmm.
Franklin Min or whatever, at a price point everyone could afford and access. And Joshua's done the same thing. The pigeon doll is now really out of reach, but the pigeon print or the
Hmm.
pigeon necklace
Right.
is within reach.
Yes.
So he has replicated in the digital world the way to hit collectors
Hmm.
and create a
Yeah.
phenomenon. Um,
Wow.
I would say another one, since we talked a little bit about Rachel and the virtual doll convention, which birthed out of the pandemic, because Rachel comes from an antique doll place,
Right. Exactly.
she's been able to educate people through her platform
Hmm.
about dolls.
Right.
And what she did really smartly is she took someone like Robert Tonner, who had retired from doll making. We have to remember, Robert Tonner,
Hmm.
Helen Kish kind of pieced out. Like they were done. Like they had done their thing. They made their money. It was not prohibitive anymore. They didn't have an audience anymore. And she's brought them in and she has interviewed them. She has
Hmm.
created a new market for them. And
Right.
new people are buying their dolls. She has created an access point. For dolls to survive, there has to be an access point for people,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to like the adult collector. And there has to be an advocate to advocate that the doll tells its own story. For
Yeah.
example, the Philadelphia Art Museum before the pandemic did this huge exhibit. It was so beautiful with all these French fashion dolls from the turn of the century. But the exhibit was about the fashion, not the
Hmm.
dolls. So while the tag might have said Kessner or Brew, there wasn't a conversation about the doll. It was about
Right.
clothes. And so we have to start centering the doll in the conversation,
Hmm.
no matter
That's
what the
true.
doll is. Really, the probably the best example of dolls in digital technology is the pigeon doll.
Hmm.
It's become an avatar in
Yes.
a way that is similar to how Barbie has done it, and yet unique. And
Yeah.
people who might not collect dolls would
Hmm.
buy a pigeon doll because they see it as an extension of Jonathan's art.
Hmm. Yeah. Go ahead.
Whereas
Sorry.
somebody virtual doll, she's catering to a doll collector
Hmm. Yeah.
and filling in the gaps.
I could see that with Lisa with Dr. Williams, Dr. Lisa
Yeah.
Williams. She's done a lot now in her space where she had like little dolls at the bottom down here,
Mhm.
the fresh beats. They're very digital. They
Yeah.
have their storyline, they do a lot of things that's positive, and it then translates into, hey, I want that doll. She went from doll to digital back to dolls
Mhm.
because now people want to see the fresh beats in real life. All the things that she created for them are very cultural because of
Right.
their hairstyles and all of those things. So yeah, I think you have to find a way to flow back into really, kind of like how you started, or either to make sure that the dolls stay, represented in whatever it is that you do. And she's doing a great job in that. She's building an amazing company
And I
that
think
way.
the thing with like the fresh beat doll, and I can't speak to this 100%, but because there's such a strong digital platform,
Mm-hmm.
an ability to um, finance, whether that's a the Kickstarter, whatever it might be, can then allow you to like you're not putting the money up front. You've
Mm-hmm.
created uh,
Mm-hmm.
the frame and the identity. It's like it's smart. It's almost like a pre-order, right? And you pay for it, like, and then
Right.
the
Right.
capital is there, whether that's physical cash capital or social capital. That when you make the doll, there's someone to buy the doll.
Right, exactly. Nowadays you cannot just make a bunch of dolls
No,
and then try to sell them. That it doesn't work like that anymore.
and that's where we shifted because it used to be the doll shop.
Yes, so
You would go to
true.
the doll shop would have you as the artist, there'd be a signing. And
Hmm.
what? We're lucky if there are five doll shops left in this country. I don't say that to be rude, it's just the truth.
Yeah, yeah, it's the truth. I mean, like you were saying, even with the doll magazines, even though it's a lot of digital stuff, it's still very little digital doll magazines.
Even the digital doll magazine, right? Like, so say, I think Fashion Doll Quarterly became digital for a while and then it ceased
Yes.
operations.
Hmm.
Um, it has the same thing as a Kindle. People want to hold something in their hand and
Yes.
like it becomes tangible, especially if you're a person who collects things, right? Like
Yes.
you buy dolls, you have doll magazines, you write in. I have a receipt from a doll that I bought on at an auction. And what's so great about it is it's the receipt. This is how nerdy I am. It's the receipt. It's a picture of the doll in the doll magazine that she cut out. And on the back, on, like all around it, she's written like all her payments to the doll. We've just become so, we don't do that anymore. We
No,
actually buy what we want.
that is true. But I think, but you know what? I think that that's why your book is so important. You know, it's just so important because it does travel the history, right? Of where these dolls started, how they became very cultural and personal to people, their history, and also now where they're at. I think your book is so needed. I think it's a great read. I love your book. I was able to read a lot of it when you sent it to me. I thought it was fascinating because I didn't think a lot about a lot of the things that you talked about in there. What made me think differently about dolls, even though I've been around them for a while.
And what's interesting, I'll share this, is some people have been really open and receptive, and some people in the doll world, like in it, are like it's like gatekeeping, like a barrier. And it's like it is
Hmm.
so weird to me. And yeah, I understand it because dolls are really personal. Even if you aren't thinking about them in that way, they're still very personal. They're
Right.
personal, like why you collect or what you collect. Recently in a doll group, this is such an interesting, a woman posted a picture of all her dolls.
Hmm.
And they weren't, dolls you would recognize, they're mass
Right.
manufactured dolls or whatever. And someone commented that her dolls, that she had wasted her money and that her dolls were worthless.
Oh, but why would you
That
do
would,
that?
I think because this person deals in antique dolls and only sees dolls as like profitable. And I just, plenty of people had a lot to say, but one of the things that I said was collecting dolls for money for turnaround, you're in the wrong business. People collect dolls because they love them.
Right.
And so because there's a love there, there is some gatekeeping. Like it can feel a little bit like, oh, okay. Or they don't see that dolls, they haven't come to a place where dolls have a really strong value. Like
Yeah,
not worth value, but like that are worthy of the conversation of on the same level as that plate or the vase.
I understand what you're saying because when you have that, like you said, when you bring that idea to the table, you just automatically cut off what the possibility could be for you, right?
Mhm.
Because your book, Dolls Beyond Play, if you get opportunity to read it, or if you take the time and say, you know what, that may not be how I feel about a doll or the value that I feel about a doll or a personal thing like that. It's still about understanding, even
Yeah,
at the base of that, understanding why you feel that way about your dolls.
exactly. And I made sure that when I wrote the book, that I centered myself as a collector. Like I am a doll collector first, and the anthropological study of dolls comes second.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like it just happens that that's my field of study, and I use
Right,
the skill to write this book. But like,
right.
it really is a love letter to dolls, to doll collectors, and to doll artists.
Yeah.
And I'll just be honest. Like my next project in my brain is how can I write about doll makers in the way that we've talked about today? Like because I think they have fascinating stories, and
Mm-hmm.
their stories reflect collectors.
Yeah.
It's sort of funny. It'd be like if someone was like, Eric, interview Bob Mackie. All I would want to talk about is Bob Mackie Barbie.
Right.
I don't really care about anything else. I'm like, good for you. You made some great clothes. But for me, Bob Mackie is a Barbie doll.
Exactly. Exactly. You're right. It's so funny because when I reached out to Byron, he's a designer. He's been a designer, and that part of his life was a part of his life. But I was like, yeah, no, we're gonna talk about dolls. I mean, there's just no
Oh,
doubt about it. You know what I mean?
like,
Because
thank you.
so I totally understand that. If you had a chance to interview
Like,
Bob
it's just
Mackey,
sort
I
of,
get that.
yeah. Well, it's funny because there's the Bob Mackie documentary, and I just fast forwarded. Where is he talking about Barbie? And what I wanted to know was never asked.
Oh,
Oh yeah, I wanted to know how did you make the dolls? Did you design the dolls? Did you do a prototype of the dolls?
right.
The dolls? Did you just do a drawing and Mattel interpreted it? Oh, I had like a list of questions, and he's like, I made Barbie. She was great. She's the only client I ever had that didn't complain.
And that's it. That was it.
And I'm like, oh no, I want to know. I want to go, and I want that for all dolls. Like when I interviewed Wendy Lawton, I was like, so when you bought Vogue, how did that? And she was so transparent, but I was just like, but some doll artists, like, they don't want to talk about that. Like, they want
Right.
to talk about, like, oh, I made the doll.
Right. Exactly.
Like, I
Yeah.
want to know everything.
Everything. That is hilarious. I love it. I love it. Well, maybe I hope I'm in your next book. That would be amazing. But anyway, just
Well, because
dropping
I
that
think
there.
that, well, and so, I think what's so great about your dolls, well, one, I think they're beautiful.
Well,
Like, I think
thank
that
you.
they're aesthetically beautiful.
Thank you.
And what I love, I know that you were creating a plus size doll, but what I love is I love that your dolls are not just one shade of brown because color exists and has a spectrum and colorism exists. So
Especially back in 2000.
yeah,
Okay.
so, yeah, so if there's only like I love Shawnee by Mattel, like great for her, great for that line. And thank you, Kitty Black Perkins, for making Black Barbie. But it was like that's the Steffi mold that's brown. And
Hmm.
she's the same brown as Julia.
Right.
People are so much more diverse than that. So
Yeah.
what it was, when it was,
Yes.
it's great. But for your dolls, it's like, oh, you really went there.
Well, we I think we realized, there are plus size people in all colors. I mean, so you really that's how we thought because we
Yeah,
initially was gonna just make Deja, who was the darker skinned one.
yeah.
And we were like, well, why should we do that? Because we're talking about people loving who they are, and at the end of the day. And so I think that's when that became much more personal for me.
Hmm.
It became much more than just the doll. It became how you felt about yourself kind of thing.
Exactly.
And then that's probably why I stayed in the doll space for so long in the community. But no, I love your book. I think your book is really a book that everybody really should read because I think yes, your dolls may be personal to you, but I think allowing people to see how they were to everybody else in different cultures and communities. And like you were saying, how you can understand how one person was playing with that doll, it just meant the same thing for the other person all across the globe.
Yeah.
I think it's just so powerful because I think people tend to forget and not connect anymore to that part of themselves.
They don't connect to that global impact. And I think it's also important that we're looking at dolls and how different populations at the same time interacted with the doll. I just think that as a culturally conscious person, as a socially conscious person, as a person who wants to understand more about dynamics,
Mm-hmm.
well, I think everyone, and I'm biased, I think everyone should study the timeline of African American dolls
Mm.
because there's so much to be said about the story of identity, of struggle, of growth, of finding place. And I think it gets lost in like, oh, now we have a Byron Lars fashion doll. But there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole bunch before that that influences it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And people
Mm-hmm.
don't know it. And I understand that that might be everybody's nerdiness. But it really shows a lot about the doll itself, not the person, but the doll
Right.
itself shows and art and by what it is demonstrates the struggle, the growth, the transformation, just in how we are
Mm-hmm.
seeing the doll. And my favorite example of that is the Pleasant Company Addie. I'm not obsessed with her. I'm
Mm-hmm.
obsessed with the little doll they made to go with her.
Mm-hmm.
And that they thought about that because that would be a real
Yes.
child and the doll. My favorite thing that creeps people out are dolls with dolls. Oh, there's a doll holding her chatty Cathy doll. Like, my husband is like, oh no, 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 not a doll holding a
I was
doll.
gonna say we can have a doll, but not a doll holding a doll. That's just
Exactly,
too much right now
too
for
much, too
me.
much. But it's so reflective
Yeah, yeah,
of like the intimacy that comes with dolls.
yeah. Man, Eric, thank you. I just we could be talking probably for two
All
more
day.
hours. So I'm just, I love your story. I just love a lot about who you are and how you see things, and and the fact that you know you took what you loved and added it to what you do, and you married those two things together,
Thank
to help
you.
you build something really beautiful with this book. So let everybody see your book first of all.
Yeah, it is really nice. It has pictures in it. Yeah, and I just want to say really quickly before we go that I'm really grateful for every person who reviewed this book. Um,
Yes.
I never thought that, they would. And I'm grateful for you for having
Oh,
me on this podcast to talk about the book. Um,
thank you.
and I just want the listener to know that while we frame this in sort of like a academic conversation in ways, the book is conversational. It's not like you're going to be reading a medical journal. Like it's meant for like the everyday person to like take a deep dive into dolls.
Yeah, it's so true. And the way you break up each section, like you said, it's very readable. It's not overwhelming. Like it's not like you're not talking in a language that people don't
Right.
understand. I mean, it's very down to earth, and that's definitely what I loved about it. So before we go, I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'll let you share how they could find you and find your book. But let me just ask you this question. So if you could bring one doll to life, right?
Oh,
A doll that could tell its own story, which doll would you choose? But from which time period or culture would it be from?
wow. This is an hour-long podcast that could easily become several. If I could bring any, oh, wow. That's such a, oh, wow. Um, okay, I have two.
Okay, okay, okay. I'll let you do that. I'll let you
I
do
got a
two.
professional one and I have a personal one.
Okay, professional one and a personal one.
Yeah.
Okay,
The
go.
professional one is I would like to see the American folk doll, the Shaker doll, the Amish doll, the African American doll, whatever your fancy is, the Appalachian doll.
Hmm.
Um, because those people's stories are the stories that no one knows.
Oh my. Okay, wait. Okay, hold up. Wait. Wait, you literally, okay, you don't, okay, you can't see the goosebumps when you said that to me, not to me, when you said
Yeah,
that, it just, goosebumps just showed up all over me because
yeah,
I just thought about their stories are not heard and will never be
not heard.
heard from a perspective of who they are or their community that they lived in and the people who, oh my gosh, that was so brilliant right
Like
there.
a
It's just
doll,
so brilliant.
one of those dolls held the store, held the secrets. They saw the world, and we just don't. We give just the nature of
Mm,
capitalism is to platform the dominant. But those folk dolls,
mm.
no, those would be the ones. Like that, those are the stories. And then just like personally, this is like sort of silly. Um, I would really love if the original 1959 Barbie could come back to life just for a minute. And so I could just ask, um, so silly. Did you feel like you were a sexualized object that was exploiting young girls? Question mark. Because there's all like, did you feel this way about
Did
your
you feel this way?
people got a lot of feelings about you? So those are the two. But really, it's the folk doll. It's the American folk doll because they hold the story.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing those two dolls with me. I thought they were just fabulous. Like I said, that first one just gave me goosebumps when you said that about the history. I think that is beautiful to even think about. Like that would be so phenomenal. So those, I think those are great, two great answers. I loved it. But before we wrap up, can you just please share about how people can find you? Definitely how they can purchase your book, and yeah, that would be great.
So this is the book, and you can find me at erickdupreeauthor.com. The book is on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, like all the places. You can get it in Kindle, paperback, or hardback. And if you're interested in sort of the ongoing research and work, it's on my website, but I also have an Instagram page, Dolls Beyond Play, and it has links to different articles I've written about dolls, doll artists who I feel whose stories have kind of been forgotten. I post their work, and those are the two places you can find me best.
Great. Well, thank you, Eric, so much for being on the Dollpreneur podcast. I'm just thrilled to have met you. I'm thrilled to know you, and I really enjoy your book. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Okay. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you again for watching the Dollpreneur podcast. where we spotlight the brilliant creators behind the dolls, giving voice to their passion, purpose, and powerful stories. This episode is brought to you by Dynamic Wellness, because your best ideas need your best energy. Thanks to Dynamic Wellness, keeping dollpreneurs healthy and unstoppable. Visit www.dynamicwellness.vip to nourish your hustle and thrive from the inside out.